Today is July 15th, 2020. My name is Joshua Furman. I'm the curator of the Houston Jewish History Archive at Rice University, and I'm here with a group to talk about the history of the Houston Yiddish Vinkel. I'd like to start with you, Henrietta. Tell us about when you came to Houston, but earlier than that, how it was that you learned Yiddish.
Ich bin Henrietta Bell. I'm Henrietta Bell. I grew up in the workman circle family. I came to Houston as a bride in December of 1948. I married Boris Bussy Bell in Miami, Florida, and I crossed the border with him on my honeymoon. I learned Yiddish scatterly because I grew up during the Depression, and wherever my father found a job, that's where we went. I attended the workman circle shulas in different cities for previous times. And my father taught me, and my mother taught me to read and write Yiddish at home. When I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, during the Second World War, and my parents were in Miami, Florida, I wrote to them in Yiddish. That's how I learned Yiddish. And Yiddish, my father was a Yiddishist, and my love of Yiddish comes from him.
And Henrietta, when and where were you born?
I was born in New York City in December of 1922 on the borough of Manhattan. I lived very, very few years in New York. I'm a Southerner. I grew up in Georgia and Florida, and now I'm a Texan.
Great, thank you. And now let's hear from Susan.
Well, I'm a New Yorker, born in Brooklyn. In my family, my parents were first generation, having come to the United States as children, but they went to American schools. We spoke English at home. I heard Yiddish from the older generation. My mother insisted that I go to Sunday school, get a Jewish education, but her idea was that I should learn Hebrew. And there's some people in that generation don't bother with Yiddish, it's the past. But I heard it around me. Then when I was in high school, I started learning Spanish, and I loved learning a language. I loved Spanish, and I thought, I have this language that's right on my finger, right at my shoulders, and I haven't picked it up. So I began, first of all, at home, convincing my mother to speak to me in Yiddish a half hour a day, which she did. And so I began to pick up a lot of things. And then it was the generation of folk singing. My daughter, the folk singer, I played the guitar, and I loved Theodor Bickel. I learned every one of his songs, and the other singers who sang Yiddish songs. And that was the beginning of how I added to my Yiddish vocabulary. I knew every one of the songs, Theodor Bickel, Martha Schlama, and other singers at the time. So fast forward, I was a Spanish major. I spent the summer in Mexico, met Jaime. We got married, and he was planning to come and do a residency in Houston, so we wind up in Houston. I think I had my two boys. I came to Houston in 1970, okay? And a relative of my husband's is a Yiddish writer from Argentina. She came to Houston, and I arranged for her to meet with, I was always active in the JCC, especially with the kids. There was a Yiddish Stunde, which Frieda Weiner was running at the JCC. I remember it was Mondays at 1:30. So I arranged for this cousin, Marta Stuka-Payuk from Buenos Aires, to come to Frieda's meeting. I took her there, and that's where I got to meet Frieda Weiner. And then when she found out that I knew Yiddish, I knew some Yiddish then, but mostly I knew all the Yiddish songs, and I still ran around with my guitar. And so I arranged to come and she was always looking for somebody, this was her big thing, to find somebody to do a program for me. Oh, you'll do a program. So I came and did a song program, and then she knew she had a kindred spirit. And I began reading with her. Go to her apartment. That time she lived in Nob Hill near the JCC. I would go to her apartment weekly for several hours, and we would prepare materials. She had all kinds of literature, and I remember it was about, my son Daniel was about 4 years old, and sometimes I would pick him up from nursery school and give him something to play with, and I would go to her apartment. And that started our friendship. And at first I was, I was good for doing programs with her, but then we began to meet, and we started the Vinkel. Oh, sorry, I'll shut off my phone.
I have it. You gotta turn this.
All right.
You want to
Sorry. We began, originally, it would meet once a month. It was a social group that would meet in somebody's home, and we would have Yiddish programs. For the people who couldn't come to her Yiddish Stunde or Yiddish hour at the JCC. And we met at my home, met in other people's homes. Henrietta might have been in your home. I don't remember. So we would initially meet in people's homes. When we got to be too big a group, we had the patronage of the JCC, which is something we can talk about later. Marilyn Hassett always helped us to get recognition and at the JCC. So we would begin when the meetings got too big to meet in people's homes. We would meet at the JCC, and we would have a meeting. That was the Yiddish Vinkel once a month. And of course, Henrietta was there, one of the first ones, along with me and other people. Meanwhile, okay.
And this is, can you give us a sense of timeline? So you said you came to Houston in 1970, and so these activities are...
Okay, and I met, and I'm talking about starting to get together with Frida, it was about 1977. Okay. She was still doing her class at the JCC, and I began also learning with her, meeting with her weekly and helping her prepare programs.
In the late 1970s or so.
Right. She was in her 90s, and she just needed help organizing things, and that was what I could do. She had the ideas, and then I began to read Yiddish with her and branch out from there. But at first, it was the Vinkel. And somewhere along the way, we picked up doing Yiddish Seders, and we would do them at somebody's house. Was it my house or maybe?
Okay.
And okay, Henrietta has something she wants to add?
The first Yiddish Seder that you put together was in 1991.
Okay, so it was, well, Frida was still alive because
yes.
I know she was there. She had a particular, there were certain readings that I remember she would introduce the Seder with a particular Yiddish reading. So meanwhile, we had the Vinkel going, and then when my kids got bigger and were in school, I began to teach some classes in Yiddish, and it was kind of, it was not formal. I taught some classes in the JCC for beginners, then I taught some classes at Beth Yeshurun, and some people, it was beginners classes, and some people, Julia was in my beginners class, right?
Right, you bet.
Okay. Barbara at some point was in one of my classes. Henrietta was always around. And some people, they were beginners classes, but then people stayed and we went further into the Yiddish and we could accommodate new people. It was kind of a mixture. And then at some point, after I had a class at Beth Yeshurun, somebody said, well, why don't, I would have to try time at Beth Yeshurun. It was difficult. They said, why don't you just do it at home? think that's when it really took off. When I began doing the classes at my home, and this was in the 90s?
I think so, yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
And once a week, we would meet in my home around my huge dining room table, and all kinds of people who knew some Yiddish, wanted to learn some Yiddish, came. And by that time, I was quite fluent in Yiddish. You know, I had learned a lot and studied a lot, and I had the material for the classes. And that was separate from the Yiddish Vinkel. Now, of course, they've joined them, which is a wonderful idea. But all through this time, as I say, we had the help and the patronage of the JCC, and specifically of Marilyn Hassett. Whenever there was a book fair, I was always consulted to get some book or some program that had to do with Yiddish. And then later, after the book fair, what was the other?
We had the film festival.
What was it?
The film festival.
The film festival, which came later. And then again, we were consulted. We were part of the planning committee, people on the Vinkel. There was always a Yiddish film. And
But we also had
And the book
things
fair.
like a Yiddish festival.
And then later, we actually had a Yiddish festival. And I don't think in many places, Yiddish groups had the support and were as close to the JCC and
Right.
as we were. And that was very much in our favor.
That's
Okay.
a very important detail. I want to pause you, Susan, and bring in the other members of the group just to share their stories a little bit. And then after we've covered everyone's personal story, then we'll cycle back to the history of the Vinkel and.
Oh, I just want to say one more thing that added special color interest to our group. In the 1980s, Houston welcomed a lot of Russian Jewish immigrants. And there was housing, the neighborhood housing near the JCC, and I was able to get a lot of these people who had grown up with Yiddish, either in the Ukraine or in the Baltic states, and to get them to participate in our programs. And that was another level. So we had all kinds of people work with Circle people originally, and then people from Soviet Union. It was quite a wonderful mixed group.
That's great. I'd like to hear from Julia tell her story just about growing up in Houston, how it was that you learned Yiddish, and how you got involved with the Vinkel, Julia.
Well, the first thing I have to say is when I decided that I really wanted to learn Yiddish, and I will talk about that, I asked
need to
people who
interrupt.
was the person in
Everyone
Houston
needs
who knew
to-
the most Yiddish.
To mute themselves. We're hearing a lot of background noise.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you
Yes.
now, but we couldn't hear your last comment.
Well, when I decided I was really interested in learning Yiddish, I asked around who was the best person in Yiddish to go to for this, and it was Susan Gantz. And now, can we hear each other?
I can hear you.
Okay. Anyway, so I used to go to Susan's house about once a week for a long time, for several months. And then, well, I'll tell you the other part. The way it had gotten started was I had decided, it was in the mid to late 80s, that I really wanted to learn Yiddish so that I could translate Yiddish women poets into English so that people would know who they were, because I was getting sick of people saying, oh, no women ever wrote in Yiddish, which was, that I knew wasn't true. And one day I met this wonderful guy, Aaron Lansky, from the National Yiddish Book Center, and he said, why don't you do something about the women? And I said, in my naivete, I said, but I don't know Yiddish. And he said, well, are you dead yet? And I said, not quite. So that was when I started working with Susan. And then after that, I spent a summer at the Oxford Yiddish program, And then the next 3 was at the YIVO summer program in Yiddish. And this absolutely turned my life around in ways that I could not begin to say. I had grown up, I think I might have told you this may not be the place for it, and you tell me. I was a 3rd generation Houstonian. My great grandfather had come to Houston in 1854. He was a rabbi, and although my parents were very Jewish, Yiddish was not something I heard except from my paternal grandmother. And after I came back from working at YIVO and in Oxford, as I said, this opened a whole new door for me, and it sort of helped that my husband came from a couple of Yiddishists like those that Henrietta mentioned, and they knew each other. They were part of the workman's circle. They were very left-wing. They subscribed to the Freiheit and Zukunft in a lot of places. And my father-in-law would occasionally teach me a phrase or two, but that was way before this other stuff happened. And anyway, I continued with it, and here I am. I don't know how much I should say at this point.
Well, Julia, maybe just talk a little bit about your literary work and how Yiddish feeds into that. I know you mentioned that you wanted to translate.
Yeah, and I have done some of that, and I started doing that when I was in the YIVO program in New York one year, and I said to somebody that I really wanted to translate these women, but I really didn't think I was good enough. And they said, nobody's good enough. Nobody's good enough when they start. Go ahead. Show it to us when you finish, and we'll tell you if it's good enough. So that's what I did. And one of the things I did after that, well, flash forward a little bit. Susan mentioned the role of Marilyn Hassid. Well, one of the things that happened, in addition to what she said, was, Susan, I still remember going to Marilyn and telling her we wanted to do something with Yiddish, and we all were so concerned that nobody would come. Well, little did we know that there was a really big notice, a really big audience for this. And it was wonderful. And after that, somebody, perhaps it was Marilyn, somebody put me in touch with the Melton program at the JCC. And so I began teaching classes I always call them, who were the women who wrote in Yiddish, and why don't we know their names? And someone said, oh, but you're teaching that over and over. And I said, I could teach this 1,000,000 times, and I still wouldn't be teaching the same person. And they said, oh, and I did that for, I think it was about 7 or 8 years. And I loved doing it. I was doing it, of course, I was doing it in English with a little bit of Yiddish thrown in. And it was just a lot of fun. I believe, I'm trying to remember, I think maybe the Sufians were in one of those classes. I can't remember. But anyway, so I began to do that, and that was kind of how it all started. And I felt that it put me in touch with a lot of people in my background. And my parents were thrilled that I was doing this, although they, for various reasons, were members of Beth Israel for decades and decades and decades. And as with Susan at the very beginning, they were there, they wanted me to learn Hebrew, and that that took for a while. And then, like you, I could have gone to Rice, but I wanted to get as far away from here as I could. So I chose to go to Brandeis. And at Brandeis, when I went there, I was so stupid. There was a wonderful Yiddish professor there, but this was before I really got into it heavily, a man named Joseph Chesky. And he was just wonderful. And now I think of the opportunity that I missed. And now whenever I go back there, people will say, didn't you take Yiddish from Dr. Chesky? I was too stupid to do it. But anyway, I've tried to, whenever a book comes out that is related to Yiddish in any way, I've for a while I reviewed books for the Jewish Book Council, and also I do a lot of that for Lilith magazine. And so they always, if something is Yiddish related, they'll say, "Would you like to do this book?" And I always say, "Sure," because for one thing, I know nobody else is going to do it if I don't. But anyway, as I said, it has made so much more out of my life than it might have been.
Julia, have you published those translations that you've been referring to? Can viewers of this interview find them?
Yes, most of them are published in a publication which unfortunately is no longer with us. It's called Bridges, Bridges, and it was moved a few years ago. It was moved to the University Press of Indiana, which has, in fact, still a wonderful, wonderful Jewish publication. And also, in a sense, my interest in the writer Laura Z. Hobson came about because I had found out that her father was an early editor of the Forwards, which you never would have known from reading anything by her. But I remember thinking, well, how did that happen? And what was the rest like? So anyway, but yeah, I have done that, yeah.
Great. I want to now welcome Barbara Goldstein into the conversation, and Barbara, tell us about yourself, about your learning Yiddish, and how long you've been in Houston.
Well, I came to Houston, my husband and I, and two of our three children came to Houston in 1977. My husband began medical practice at that time, January 1977, and really was not involved in Yiddish at all. We were members of Congregation for Shalom and lived very typical lives. Then my parents, of course, were aging. My father became ill, and really about that time, I became aware also of Aaron Lansky. I received his letters talking about his efforts to save and revive Yiddish. And I thought, well, I really don't know the social history about all this, and I truly am interested. And at the same time, my father was ill, and my mother, who was a wonderful, believe it or not, a wonderful Yiddishist, she spoke it well, she wrote it, and she read it. But interestingly enough, she and my father, as was typical, did not speak it unless they wanted me and my brother not to know what they were saying. That was very common. However, I wanted to distract her, and I thought Yiddish would be it, and I was right. So I became interested, of course, in Yiddish and shared information that I was learning from Erin Lansky, and she was very excited, and so we sort of fed each other, fueled each other. I actually went with my husband and our young son to a summer program at Mount Holyoke in Massachusetts. This was before the Yiddish Book Center was built. They were trying to build it. And we spent a week there. It was spectacular. My son was in a Yiddish camp, and I was starting to learn Yiddish. When I came back to Houston, I learned about Susan, and Susan so graciously said, yeah, you could come into our classes. And remember, I knew nothing. So, and I would listen, but she would, tolerate my attempts to read something painstakingly. And later on, Susan actually spent time with me one-on-one and taught me how to read Yiddish. Susan is my teacher. Susan is how I know Yiddish, essentially. And then I attended some Vinkel meetings. And then when the Vinkel meetings class moved into Susan's home, I just enjoyed it so much. In the meantime, Henrietta Bell, who is a Bren, was pushing me, Barbara, there's an international association of Yiddish clubs. We should be members of that association. Okay, so we joined. Well, that was incredible. That was very exciting. There were a whole bunch of clubs, Yiddish clubs, like the Houston Yiddish Vinkel, who belonged to this umbrella organization. And about every 2 years, there would be some special event, a convention, and we'd go to that and be amazed by wonderful teachers and wonderful theater programs and singing, etc. They had a newsletter, and Henrietta said, well, we need our own newsletter. So with my primitive computer skills, we started Yiddish by the Bayou, which was our newsletter. And every month, we would send out notices to our members about what was happening with our members and what programs were in Houston and what programs were going on in the nation and internationally.
Hang on a second, Barbara. Hang on a second, Barbara. Susan wants to say something real quick.
Surely.
I just wanted to say, where did we get the idea came Yiddish by the Bayou? Because in Yinglish, you would say, well, how's Bayou? And so Yiddish, Bayou, that's where I got the connection. Okay.
Right. And also we were meeting, because we were involved with the JCC. So it all made sense to have Yiddish by the Bayou. That was another influence,
And I have paper copies of some of these newsletters.
Right. And we did go to a number of conventions, Henrietta and Susan and I, and some other members. Oh, and the Sufians, we went to Los Angeles in 1998. And we're at a wonderful convention there at the university. So things just evolved, and we kept on gaining members, and it has been the most incredible, enriching time. It also included, as they remarked, Yiddish festivals, which we had in the late 90s. It involved a couple of Yiddish Seders at the JCC that were spectacular, and numerous other programs. Julia was very influential in terms of bringing outstanding Yiddish people to the programs at the JCC. I mean, Julia knew these people personally even. So we had Adrian Cooper and Zalman Malotic and Itzik Gottesman and many others. So that was very fine. And I could go on and on, but I think that's essentially how I was, involved all these years.
Mm-hmm. So each of you has, your own story of how you came to Yiddish. and why. And it's just really fascinating to sort of hear them all together. Let's see. Beverly, are you there?
I saw her.
I'm
I see
here,
Beverly.
finally.
There's Bev. Hi, Bev. Can
What
you
do
hear
want
me?
to tell? Oh, wait. Yes, yes, yes. There's something in the way here.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's
hold
something
on.
in the way.
No. I know. What could it be? Oh, here it is.
There
Okay.
it is.
What do you want to know?
Can you
Sorry.
tell us about who you learned Yiddish from and when you came to Houston and how you got involved with the Vinkel?
Okay, well, I was born with Yiddish. That was everybody in my family only spoke Yiddish. They were all immigrants. They spoke English, but not well. So they always spoke Yiddish. My sister went to kindergarten. She couldn't speak English. So that's how everybody knew Yiddish. My parents did not do it as a secret. They did Russian as a secret. So the secret. But so I don't know, it was on my first language. Of course, I had trouble in elementary school switching into English, but whatever. So yeah.
Beverly, where did you grow up?
And Brownsville, Brooklyn, which was a totally Jewish, Yiddish-speaking neighborhood. The only non-Jews were the superintendents, were the janitors. Everybody was Jewish, totally. Anyway, so I don't know, in 1970, we came here. And my mother used to come for the winters. And I would take her to the J, and she made friends with Frida Weiner and all the other people because she herself believed in speaking Yiddish. She sang Yiddish, and my sister only did Yiddish. And then eventually she moved into B'nai B'rith Tower. And at B'nai B'rith Tower, Frida Weiner started a Shabbos, I don't know, Susan, if she told that, a Saturday morning.
No, I didn't.
A Saturday group where they would get together, especially the Russians and my mother and Frida. They would sing, and all the other ladies or men, whoever was there. And I would go, and I took my daughter with me. We'd go on Saturday. And eventually, I joined Susan's group at Beth Yeshurun. I don't know why. I don't even know what happened. But, and I remember Susan's, every time we went, there was a different room. So Susan says, that's it. We're going to my house. So that's really why we started in her house. The biggest thing was getting an author for the book fair. Of course, Marilyn was always on our side, but I remember, and Dave and I were on the book fair committee, but I remember Julia saying, oh, somebody stood up and said, who wants to have a Yiddish person? And my answer was, but they never said never having a Hebrew-speaking person. Every year they had a Hebrew-speaking author. That was definite, because the Hebrew-speaking people would have killed them. So that's when Julia and I started fighting, and Marilyn and Susan, etc., for the author. And of course, we had a full house. Hello.
Absolutely.
We had such turnouts. What?
No, we had some of the major Yiddish writers in the world right now. And when everybody was shocked, because when they would speak, they got a standing ovation. Like
Everybody came. And so the book fair started looking at Yiddish in a totally different light. And then Marilyn said to me, oh, she hears that Shalom Aleichem in his will wanted his writings to be read. Is that true? On his yard site, yes. So Marilyn said, well, let's do it. Well, you can imagine, 100 people came. I mean, we thought no one would come. I remember calling my sister and saying, wouldn't believe they had to bring in more chairs. So that's how we made our mark with the Shalom Aleichem. It has not been easy. I would say it has not been easy, but we fought for it and we get it. And even on the day a few years ago when they had the the memorial for the Holocaust, we had 70 people anyway. Anyway, what else do you want to know? So then it evolved to once Susan moved, and I had been asking my husband for years to go to that class. He wouldn't. I said, listen, let's do it in my house. Maybe then Dave will go. So, of course, it has enriched his life. And so we have it here. Now we're on the Zoom, which it's unbelievable. We have people from all over the world
That's
literally
right,
joining
yes.
our group. We did go with Barbara to both Yiddish conferences. The other thing that we did was we went to CLES Canada, most of us. And my sister,
Yeah,
we went to
Beverly and Dave got us to go to CLES Canada,
right.
And we also went to a couple of the other things that Barbara mentioned out in California.
Right.
And we all met a lot of people that way.
Right, but for us, it became a family gathering. My sister, my brother, we would all meet in Montreal, and spend a week together at CLES Canada. Is there anything else you want to know?
That was
You see
great.
my shirt? We even have a shirt. The Yiddish Vinkel has
That's
a
right.
shirt.
Look at Beverly's shirt.
It says Tiefen der Hause Yiddish lebt. So I
just wanted to, can I add something?
Yeah, that's it.
That being at Yiddish club and going to the conferences with all these people, when I actually moved to Florida, we moved to be near our son. That was my connection here in Florida, because the first year I moved to Florida, they had the last Yiddish conference here in South Florida, and all the friends I have now are a result of that conference.
Right.
That's wonderful.
Goes on.
Right.
That's
I have
great.
to say that for Hebrew school, I went to a secular Hebrew school, not affiliated with a synagogue. My parents, although they went to shul once, they were very secular people. And at that shula, which is what they called it, I learned Yiddish and had to read and write. And on Fridays we had singing, and we sang Yiddish songs. That's how I learned to read and write. My parents didn't teach me to read and write Yiddish, but I learned at that school, that shula.
Yeah, in Brownsville. I wanted to bring Henrietta back.
On my
She had a
street.
hand up. I wanted to bring Henrietta back into the conversation. Yes,
Sure.
Henrietta?
No, I just wanted to say that when my husband was away in medical school, he wrote to his parents in Yiddish.
No.
And of course, they understood every word. The people that didn't understand were the family in Israel. They didn't get it. But he told them they needed to learn.
My mother did two postcards.
Yeah.
All right, Henrietta's been waiting.
So anything else you want to know, Josh?
We're gonna talk to Henrietta now. Go ahead, Henrietta.
Sure.
I want we all here in Houston know that out in Maryland Hassett at the JCC, our programs would never have been brought to fruition. We did a third Seder at the JCC in 1991. We had people from the community come in. I think we had 75 people at the table. She's the one, as someone mentioned before, that we brought our Shalom Aleichem yearly program that started in 2016. All this through Marilyn Hassan.
She wrote it down.
She was always interested in Yiddish and bringing people here. We even did a mock Yiddish wedding at the JCC. And the Yiddish Vinkel did a program in Yiddish and English at the Holocaust Museum.
Right.
We have a member who wrote a book about her city. I can't remember the name now. And we did readings from that at the Holocaust Museum. And they gave us a room this
Lisa
big.
Struzand. Lisa Struzand.
And she still comes to our Seders sometimes.
Yeah. And we had standing room only. People were hanging out in the hallway at the museum.
Right.
To hear this program. So I want you to know that we're still fighting at the JCC for Yiddish programming.
We are.
No kidding. That's right.
We are.
I'm sure.
But that's life.
My
Yeah.
next question is this. So take us, for those of us who haven't been able to attend a Vinkel meeting, and anybody watching this recording, before anybody ever heard of coronavirus, right? What is a typical Vinkel meeting like? How many people come? What do? You know, you read, you sing, what happens? Go ahead.
It seems to me as if it has grown. So we meet at the Sufian's house, and don't we often have more than 20 people?
Oh, yeah. 25,
And
yeah.
we read and we sing and we discuss.
We translate.
Yeah, right. We really learn a whole lot.
We start our meeting with a song that Maurice Wolfall picks out. We listen to the song, we read it in Yiddish and translate it, and then we sing when we sit around the Sufian's table. And then Minnegrauer, who is our teacher now, selects the works that we read. And she, her outlook is a little different than Susan's was, but she opens the world for us. We read comic pieces, we've read tragedy pieces. We read a lot of the younger, newer authors. Has a lot of Hebrew in it, hard for me. But Minnegrauer leads our selection of what we read now. Now on Zoom, we have had up to 60 people on Zoom. We are now an international group. And I've always said Houston is a hidden jewel.
Mhm.
We have people from Barbara's sister-in-law from Jerusalem. We have people from Argentina.
Mhm.
We have Canadians.
Toronto.
Who have I left out?
Oregon.
We've had up to 60 people on our Zoom meetings. We have 5 very young people who read with us, who are in their 20s, I would say.
Mhm.
So Zoom has helped us open our wings. And
Julia,
if
what
we
did you
ever
want
go
to
back
say?
to the Sufians, we have to figure out what we're going to do then.
Yeah, go ahead, Julia.
Yeah,
What was the question?
one of the people that has really meant a lot to us is no longer alive, and that was Adrian Cooper, who was probably the finest Yiddish center in the world at that time, who used to come and do programs with Zalman Mlotek. And Adrian, before she died, one of the things she was from New York, of course. One of the things, not of course, but one of the things she said was, you know, first there's New York and then there's Houston. And we just got so excited by this. She had it right.
Yeah. Yeah, Susan, please. Hang on a second, Susan. You're on mute. Just wait.
Where is he?
Susan's here. I'm trying to. There you are. Go ahead. Nope, you just got muted again. Just a minute.
You mentioned Mina Grau, who now provides the material for the Yiddish Vinkel. She took over as the teacher, and it was a wonderful, lucky thing that she came to Houston a few years. She was fairly new. She was in my Yiddish class a couple of years, and she's an Israeli, so she's very fluent with the Yiddish writing, with the language, and she's a child of Holocaust survivors. Yiddish was very important to us, to her family, and she was able to take, you know, Beverly and Dave had it at their house, and she was able to take over the content of the program, and she's an academic also. She knows where to get material, and it's been a wonderful transition. I give her a tremendous amount of credit, and she always has patience, and she always has new things, and it's terrific. Of course, Maurice, you mentioned, who does the songs. It's grown into something beautiful.
Great.
I agree.
Am I muted or am I on?
You're on, Bev. We
You're
can hear
on.
you.
Well, yeah, if yesterday when we finished the class, I said we get a college education because the caliber of the intellectual, whatever it is, of the people now that are on it, unbelievable. Professors and all sorts of Yiddish people that you don't know, and you don't know where the story will lead us to what we learn. I mean, we learn so much, and everybody is so nice. But lately, we just showed a film where we had 60 people, so we added. I have a list of about 100 people now that I send anything Yiddish, you know, on a whatever you call a list. And we have so many people interested that thank me. They never even come, but if they ever meet me, oh, you're the Yiddish. Oh, thank you so much for sending me all that interesting information. So it's not just the classes; it's all the exposure that we try to give everybody.
How is the
I have to
transition from
add
being on?
that we wouldn't be doing Yiddish on Zoom
No, go
Oh
ahead,
yeah,
Henrietta, because that was my
if it were not
question
for
was going
Yiddish
to
by
be-
Nacht and Michael Moore.
Michael Moore. Do you know him?
I do know Michael. Talk about what he's done for the group.
Yes.
Oh.
Michael has a class at Yiddish at night, Yiddish by Nacht. And he is a computer wizard. He is
Genius.
the person who put us on Zoom. And that's why we're an international group now. I don't know that this would have happened without him. He is a Yiddishist. He's very literate. He speaks and reads Yiddish beautifully.
He taught
And
himself.
he has advised a lot of the younger people that we have in our Yiddish group now.
He taught himself.
And he also has recorded
Michael Moore.
and put
Can you
on
see?
our, we have a website. He's Houston Yiddish Vinkel, and he recorded some of our programs. And on that website, we also recorded one of our Passover meals that had done it completely in Yiddish at the Sufian's house.
It's really great. I mean, what you
What
get
else
out
is
of this
he-
conversation, I think, is a really profound sense of generational transmission, right? From generation to
Absolutely.
generation.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
each of you came to Yiddish in a different way. Some of you from the day you were born, others as adults.
Right.
And I really get a feeling that it sustains you and that it nourishes you, not just the language, the culture, and the history, but also the strong sense of community that you've built around Yiddish.
Very strong,
here in
exactly.
Houston. So what I want
Yes.
to end with, because our time is running out, is I want to hear from each of you. Why do you love Yiddish? What is it about Yiddish that you love? Why is Yiddish so important and worth preserving? I'd like each of you to kind of reflect on that in turn, and I'm going to start with Susan.
Yiddish, c'est moi. I found so much in Yiddish that explains to me who I am. And as I said, I didn't start out with Yiddish, and then propelled me forward to learn more about myself, my culture, America, and it all fits in with the learning of Yiddish, my Jewish self, and our relationship to the community, et cetera, et cetera. It makes me feel whole.
Good.
Yeah. Henrietta, what does Yiddish mean to you, Henrietta?
My father was a Yiddishist. He was a socialist. In our family, Yiddish was very important. It's part of my heritage. It's part of who the Jewish people are. And it's very important to me. Like most of us, I didn't have the good sense to speak Yiddish in my home and teach my children Yiddish. For a very, very short time, we did have a Yiddish teacher in Houston, and I took my older daughter, Marion, to Dave's class for 2 years. It's just part of the Yiddish people heritage. And I feel it's very important. And it's part of what we are.
Beautiful. Thank you. Julia, how about for you? What does Yiddish mean to you, Julia?
Well, to say it broadened my life would just be an understatement. I've always been very interested in languages, and Yiddish is just such a luscious, rich language with so many facets to it that it's difficult to stay away from it. And it's very, very difficult to say what all it means, but also in meeting people at various meetings who have grown up with it, have grown with it. I've seen another aspect of it, and I've seen people for whom it's their lives. And it frankly would never be mine because I came to it so late. But it is really something that I could not be without.
Yeah. Beverly, how about for you? Talk about what Yiddish means to you and why Yiddish is so important.
Well, because my husband and I, we grew up with it. It's enriching. For me, right now, it's the most enriching thing I do all week. The stories and the people that we learn and how it takes off on tangents of the different people involved. That it's totally the most enriching thing that we do now that we're stuck here.
Yeah,
but and it's our heritage. It's our heritage, and it's something. I'm a fighter, so I want to fight for Yiddish. Just like I fight for other things. I just feel that we have to keep fighting for Yiddish because now young people are fascinated, wonderful. They want to learn Yiddish. They feel more comfortable now, I think. So for me, it's been enriching. What's it?
Can I just add one more thing?
Take that off. You can't talk though. Yes, go
Can I
ahead.
just add a small thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Julia.
I find it very thrilling when we see photographs in movies of the Lower East Side and we see all of the signs, all the street
In
signs,
Yiddish.
all the store signs, they are in Yiddish. And it is amazing to me. And I just love it.
Mm.
We can read them.
You can read it. All right.
You want to say
We can
something?
read
Barbara, let's unmute you, Barbara, and give you the last word.
Okay. It's Mama Loshen. It's mother's language. So it's my connection to my mother, to my parents, to my grandparents. It tells me my history. It tells me my identity. It also makes me culturally literate where I was not before. When we read Shalom Aleichem, you could read an English translation, but you lose Yiddishkeit. If you want to understand concepts, Jewish concepts, then you read it in Yiddish. You read the Yiddish language, you read the phrases, you read the expressions, and then, as Beverly says, we delve into it. Well, for some of us, we're coming to these concepts for the first time. Orthodox people may not, but we who came from a more secular background are learning this for the first time, and this is incredible. I feel that I certainly am learning, and it benefits me as a Jew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gut gesagt.
Good gesagt. Well said. I want to thank everyone for taking the time today to talk about your own histories, to talk about the history of the Vinkel in Houston. It's enriching, it's inspiring, and this language more than 1,000 years old. It's you can't kill Yiddish, right? It lives on. It moves.
No way.
It travels over oceans, and it adapts even to pandemics.
Mama Lotion.
It lives
You
on
know what?
now. So I
You
want
bet.
to.
Absolutely, yes.
You know what Singer said? Yiddish is dying. They said, "What do you think about Yiddish dying?" He says, "Yiddish has been dying for 1,000 years. It'll die for another 1,000." That's what
Well
Isaac Basheva said. But Josh, you're on our list. I send you all the stuff. I don't know if you have time to look at it, but I do. You're on my Yiddish list.
I'm on the list.
I
get
hope
the
some
emails.
you'll click in with Zoom.
Yeah.
You get my emails. But if you come
Join
once,
us for a few minutes and see all the different faces.
I'll have to
you'll
join.
never go back. You'll never go back. People that start, I tell them, just try it once. You don't have to say one word. Just, oh, I don't know Yiddish. I don't know.
That's right,
and
yeah.
that's it. They're hooked. They're hooked. They never go. Now they're always on.
I believe it. I believe it. Thank you
All
so
right,
much,
John.
everyone.